Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity for me also to ventilate on this particular motion. And I want to say right from the onset that I do support this particular motion, Madam Speaker, because this is our country. If it sinks, it sinks with all of us. Madam Speaker, allow me to first give pass my condolences to the families of those that lost their loved ones during the skirmishes that were there last week and this week, Madam Speaker. We know how it feels to lose a loved one, Madam Speaker, especially where such a death was abrupt and sudden, Madam Speaker. And I maintain that our police officers should only use live bullets or open fire, Madam Speaker, where they are facing an enemy mostly that is armed. And Madam Speaker, not just somebody that is just demonstrating, Madam Speaker. And I think the police are well trained to deal, to immobilize and arrest wrongdoers, Madam Speaker. So I want to say that opening fire should be the last resort because everybody that has been given power, they should be able to exercise it with restraint, Madam Speaker, and with the responsibility. Madam Speaker, the Gen Zs have spoken, and they had a right under Section 37 of our Constitution that guarantees any citizen the right to demonstrate and express themselves through demos, Madam Speaker, as long as they are unarmed. And so we want to say the Generation Z were perfectly within their right under the Constitution, and we know they were not armed. Madam Speaker, we must also take this opportunity to separate chaff from wheat, Madam Speaker, because, of course, we know that these demos have been infiltrated by criminals, Madam Speaker, whom we must see to it, especially as police officers. The police officers should see to it that action is taken against criminals that infiltrate genuine demonstrations, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is a time to reflect. This is a time to ask ourselves, exactly how did we find ourselves here? And Madam Speaker, I may say things that maybe have been said here, Madam Speaker, but we need to repeat where necessary of the things that have not been done in the right way and that have cost us the problem that we find ourselves in. People have talked about opulence, display of, money, living, largesse in the lives of politicians, Madam Speaker. People carrying bundles of notes. Madam Speaker, this is something that must be condemned by all and sundry. Some of us have been ridiculed for not having, those loads and loads of cash. Madam Speaker, that when maybe you are attending a harambe somewhere and you give something or you contribute something from your salary that may not be as big as maybe some colleagues that you may be with, Madam Speaker, carrying hundreds of thousands or even millions, Madam Speaker, it's sad that even some church leaders have ridiculed some of us, saying that we contribute, amounts that cannot even buy some tobacco, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, I think this is something that Kenyans have been watching slowly but surely and have not been very happy about, Madam Speaker. And this is something that we should all condemn. Let people, if they have to contribute their hard-earned cash, Madam Speaker, because this points to corruption. Otherwise, we know how much people are paid, and how much they contribute in these RBs, Madam Speaker. And this is something that we need to talk about. Madam Speaker, there have been very many things that have been happening in our society. I have a background of education, Madam Speaker, and I can tell you there are things that we have done in this country that should not be done, including taking some public institutions of learning and kind of privatizing them, Madam Speaker. And allow me to mention one or two. Madam Speaker, we have a school called Hospital Hill Primary School. This is a public school, but that has been privatized. Nairobi Primary School, Madam Speaker. There is a school called Tigoni Primary School in Kiambu. These are public schools, but which people, the middle class and people who are well-to-do, have taken and, introduced some rules, some, arrangements through the PTA, Madam Speaker, and kind of privatize these schools, where it is very hard for ordinary motors, Madam Speaker, to gain admittance to that school, to those schools for their children. And all this time, our people have been watching, that I cannot be able to take my child to Nairobi Primary School because there are charges, illegal charges, Madam Speaker. And people have been, this has been building up. Madam Speaker, corruption is also something that has made people to build up some anger and, dissatisfaction against government and leadership, Madam Speaker. And recently, there was a young man, Madam Speaker, I know this is a subject of a court case, but I'm not going to discuss the merits or demerits of the same. But Madam Speaker, a young man, it was unfortunate, but a young man felt that he could not, according to his claim, he could not be able to raise the bribe that a police officer was asking, Madam Speaker. And the young man ended up beating up that police officer, Madam Speaker. I do not want to stand here and say that that was right. But, Madam Speaker, you can imagine that it was out of frustration that a police officer is demanding amounts of money from a young man that cannot afford such amounts of money. And, Madam Speaker, some police stations have even been able to upscale corruption. And I want to cite Kasarani police station, Madam Speaker. This is a police station where you will find tens of police officers along the road, Madam Speaker. And what do? They do not want to take the usual 50 or 10 or 100 Kenya shillings, Madam Speaker. So they'll just order you to drive your vehicle into the police station where they will demand for a big amount of money as bribe, Madam Speaker, before you are released. And, Madam Speaker, we must call this out. This is why we are where we are, because those that cannot afford these amounts of money, Madam Speaker, are always at a disadvantage.